Dog training is an art as well as a science, and if you can understand the science, then you can master the art. Congratulations, you're about to embark on a great adventure with your dog. The following is a highly condensed, brief system to revolutionize life with your canine companion. The purpose of dog training is to enhance relationships between dogs and their owners. Implementation of training principles is designed to put you and your dog on the same page together. In summary, dog training is the process of helping your dog to understand your expectations. As they are not capable of cognitive reasoning, as is practiced by us bipedal mammals, we must instead use systems of conditioning, pattern recognition, and positive habit forming to create our desired results and help the dog to comprehend our own thoughts and feelings. Keep in mind that much of the material will be repeated throughout this audiobook. This is a good thing, as you will start to realize that dog training is not as difficult as you may have once thought it was. Before we begin, let's break down the dog training terminology. Positive reinforcement. This is when you give your dog a reward for performing a behavior that you would like your dog to repeat. Negative reinforcement. This is when leash pressure is applied and it is only turned off when your dog complies. Positive punishment. This is when someone would use a physical correction, such as popping on the leash, to reduce the occurrence of a behavior. Negative punishment. This is when you withhold a reward from your dog. For example, your dog wants a treat, so you tell him to sit. He decides not to sit, so he doesn't receive the reward. Leash pop. This is when you would make a snapping motion with the dog's leash to engage the training collar to give the dog a correction. This would be a form of positive punishment. Luring. This is when you use food to guide your dog into a desired position. And once your dog is in that position, you would then release the reward to your dog. Chasing. This is when you make your dog chase food that is in your hand to increase food drive, prey drive, play drive, and make the training more fun for your dog. You can also have your dog chase toys to build your dog's toy drive. Value transfer. This is when your dog has something of value, and you use something of equal value to get that item from your dog. It's like you're making a trade with your dog, so it's important to give your dog the other item when you use this technique, or your dog could lose trust in you. It's also a great technique to teach the command, drop it. Climb command. This is a command that requires your dog to go to an elevated position and maintain that position until released. A climb command can be a dog bed, a park bench, the car, or whatever position you choose for your dog as long as it's an elevated position. Heel is a position either on your left or right side that your dog must maintain when commanded. As soon as you stop moving, your dog should then sit in heel position. Sit front. This is when your dog is sitting in front of you looking at your face. You want your dog as close to you as possible without touching you. The dog should be centered and straight. Mark or marker, condition reinforcers. This is a word or sound that predicts either a reward or a correction. Your communication channels to your dog, markers or condition reinforcers. A, continuation marker. This is a sound that lets your dog know they are correct and you will be delivering a reward to them. B, terminal marker. This lets your dog know they are correct and they may come to you to get the reward. It is a release word that also predicts that a reward is about to be given. C, non-reinforcement marker. This is for mistakes. Remember, it is imperative that your dog knows that they can make a mistake and attempt the behavior again. This is a signal for negative punishment, which means withholding the reward from your dog until your dog does the behavior correctly. D, condition correction. This is a signal for positive punishment. Directional to the collar. This means that your dog understands what the remote collar is and understands that it is a correction that is coming from you, and that it's not just some random bug biting your dog's neck. So when you correct your dog with the remote collar, without a leash being attached, he or she knows that you are the one correcting him. Fixed shaping. This is when you have a training goal in mind, but you're letting your dog figure out what you want instead of showing your dog. For example, you put your dog in a room with a skateboard. When your dog naturally investigates the skateboard, you would use your condition reinforcer to mark the dog's behavior. This will show the dog that the skateboard is a good thing. This is how some trainers teach their dog to ride a skateboard. This is also a step that many trainers use to teach their dog scent detection. Free shaping. This is when you don't have a particular training goal in mind and you are simply watching your dog to see if your dog will perform a behavior that you like. For example, your dog does a cute stretch in the morning when they wake up, and you can mark this action. After enough repetitions, your dog will start to offer up that behavior for a reward. Now let's go into a little more detail of how these things work together. Science of dog training. Teaching your dog any command. There is a proven scientific process to teach your dog any desired command. So let's look now at some of the basics that trainers use to reinforce obedience behaviors using the prior listed terminologies. First, we want to develop our communication channels. We like to call these markers or condition reinforcers. These are going to be words or sounds that will let our dog know when they are right or wrong. There are two positive types of markers. The first one is the continuation marker. This is a word or sound that lets the dog know that they are correct and they will be delivered a reward. To apply a continuation marker, the dog must maintain the position they are in. For example, you tell your dog to sit. Once your dog sits, you use the continuation marker to let your dog know they are correct and you will be bringing them a reward. However, they must maintain the sit stay. The next type is called terminal markers. These release dogs from a previous behavior. Example, if a dog was in a sitting position, they are released from that position, indicating the sitting behavior is finished. We have two versions of this marker. The first version lets the dog know that they are correct and they will come to the trainer for the reward, which also releases them from the prior behavior. The second version of the terminal marker lets the dog know that they are correct and they may go to get the reward. For example, if you have a ball out in the training field and your dog was aware that the ball was there, they would be released to get the toy. We also have a non-reinforcement marker, and this is for mistakes. For example, if you tell your dog to sit and the dog downs instead, you would use your non-reinforcement marker and then you would recommand the sit. Once the dog sits, you would then reward the dog. Giving the dog the ability to make mistakes and try again is imperative. If the dog gets the correction for making a mistake, then the dog will become a little more careful and less likely to attempt new behaviors, which would make it more difficult to teach new commands. The last marker is a signal for positive punishment. This sound lets the dog know that they will be corrected. Trainers use this for behaviors they would like to remove from the dog's repertoire. Then, the correction is performed through a remote training collar or leash pop with a pinch collar. It's important that these markers are pinpointed at the moment of time an undesirable behavior occurs, because if the timing is off, the dog will think the correction is being made for an entirely different behavior. Once we teach our dog the different markers, we then move to the next step, which is to show the dog what we want them to perform. This is called shaping. Before we name a command, the dog must first understand, through a physical cue, what we want and expect from them. Let's use sit as an example. If I'm using food, I will lift my hand up, and as the dog follows my hand, their butt naturally goes down into a sit. The second the dog sits, I would use one of my markers, and then I would reward the dog. Once I know that every time I lift my hand up, the dog will sit, it is then time to name the command. This goes for any command we are trying to teach our dog. We must first get the dog to perform the behavior with a physical cue. Once we have our dog performing the action with our physical cue, it is then time to name the command. A common mistake that most people make is when they decide to name the command, they will say the command while they are giving the dog the physical cue. If you pair your physical cue with your verbal command, the physical cue will override the verbal command, and that will become the only cue for the behavior. If we want the dog to learn the verbal command, then it is important to make sure that the verbal precedes the physical by a split second. It must be a predictable pattern to the dog, so the process becomes command, motivate, mark, and reward in that order. Therefore, you say sit, then you lift your hand. Once your dog's butt hits the ground, you then mark and then reward. You will continue to use the physical cue until the dog beats you to it, meaning you say sit and before you lift your hand, the dog is already sitting. If you follow this order, you can teach your dog any desired command that the dog can physically perform. Here's a simple analogy to remember how timing works. We need to make sure that we always keep timing in mind when we are training, and we need to never pair our physical with our verbal if we are trying to teach our dog a verbal command or a verbal cue. This analogy will help you remember the process. Let's say I place a blindfold on you, and I told you that I was going to swing a stick at your head, but before I swing the stick, I'll say duck. This would give you just enough time to duck before I hit you with the stick. But imagine if I said duck and swung the stick at the exact same time. You would get beaten in the head with the stick every single time because it wasn't predictable. So when you are teaching your dog a command, say the command first and then show your dog the physical cue, just like in this analogy. Putting everything together. Teaching a new service dog. Let's say we want to teach a service dog to perform deep pressure therapy, where the dog lays firmly on the owner, like laying on their lap, in response to a specific event. In this case, the owner's leg begins shaking. In this event, you want the dog's behavior to be triggered by a natural physical cue, which is the leg shaking. We also want the dog to be able to do this in response to a verbal command. Let's use the word lap. First, ensure your dog can perform the task by using markers and a physical cue, such as luring or leash pressure. For example, the pressure from the leash provides a motivation for the dog to come and sit on your lap, or luring the dog to your lap using food. Mark and reward successful completion. Once the dog demonstrates successfully performing the task via the physical cue, then associate the task with another physical cue. In this example, it's the leg shaking. The process would go as follows. Begin to shake your leg, then immediately follow, but do not pair, the action with luring or the leash pressure to bring the dog to the lap. Mark and reward the successful completion of this behavior. Next, begin to implement a verbal command into the mix. This is important because somebody who has a service dog may not only want their dog to implement something like deep pressure therapy only when they shake their leg. They may want to be able to ask their dog to perform this behavior at any point in time. So teaching the dog a verbal command for this is also very important. For this, start to shake your leg. Then announce the verbal command, lap. Mark and reward when the behavior is completed. Do not say the verbal command before you shake your leg. You must shake your leg first, then deliver the verbal command, mark and reward upon completion. The idea is that it becomes a predictable pattern for the dog. They realize that leg shaking always predicts the behavior. Eventually, when you shake your leg, the dog will perform the desired behavior immediately. This process will work for all the desired tasks. These are the important introductory concepts to understand before we move into the execution of the basic dog training concepts in the next chapter. Dog training basics. In the first part of this booklet, we'll go over the fundamentals that I always teach to new students. This is perhaps the most important part, and every other part of your dog's training skills are built upon this foundation. Remember to follow the 3 primary principles of dog training. 1. Timing. It's scientifically proven that we have approximately 1 second to influence a dog's behavior. This means you have 1 second to reward your dog for a behavior you would like them to repeat, and 1 second to correct your dog for any behavior you would not like them to repeat. If the reward or the correction does not come within 1 second, then your dog will not make the connection. The moment your dog does the behavior you are trying to capture, you have to either deliver a primary reinforcer, such as food, toy, or affection, or a condition reinforcer, such as our markers, the terminal marker or the continuation marker, within the first second of the dog completing that behavior. The same principle applies for actions you would not like your dog to repeat. The moment your dog does the behavior in question, you have to deliver either the primary correction or condition correction within a second of your dog doing that behavior. Here is an example of how important timing is. Let's say you're doing a downstay with your dog and you're in a wide open space like a football field. While you're walking away from your dog across the field, your dog breaks the downstay without you seeing. Your dog then decides to run to you. And when you turn around and see your dog running at you, you then correct your dog for breaking the downstay. Even though you believe that you were correcting your dog for breaking a downstay, what you really did was corrected your dog for coming to you, which is something we don't want to do. Since you are not able to see your dog break the downstay, you should not have corrected the dog. Instead, you should have rewarded your dog for coming to you. 2. Motivation. Your dog will always do whatever is most motivating. For example, if you're trying to get your dog to perform a sit and he is surrounded by his favorite thing in the world, which is rabbits, he's going to be more motivated to chase the rabbits in comparison to his motivation to work for the treat. It's important to keep in mind that a dog can be motivated by many things. They can be motivated to access something pleasant, such as an actual reward or the act of doing something fun. Or they can be motivated to prevent something unpleasant. By making sure that you always provide the most motivating factors for your dog, you will ensure reliability in your dog's obedience. There are 4 ways you can motivate a dog to perform a behavior. You have food, toy, affection, and force. It's important you learn to use all 4 types of motivation for your training. Another factor to keep in mind is that speed is based on motivation. The more motivated your dog is, the faster your dog will perform the desired behavior. Lastly, when a dog does a behavior, it's because of 3 main reasons. Firstly, the dog is trying to get access to a reward. 2, the dog is trying to prevent something unpleasant. Or 3, the dog is doing the behavior because the behavior itself is self-reinforcing or self-rewarding, meaning the behavior is actually fun, like chasing rabbits. The dog may never catch the rabbit, but the act of chasing the rabbit feels so good to the dog that it continues to do that behavior. 3, consistency. This one is paramount because even if you have bad timing and poor motivation, if you are consistent, your dog will still be able to learn. You always want to keep in mind to always stay consistent with what you want and what you expect from your dog. If you let your dog jump on the furniture one day, don't correct your dog for jumping on the furniture the next day. If you are inconsistent, you will create stress and confusion for your dog. If you would like your dog to be on the couch sometimes, but not all the time, then make it a command, so the dog can only perform the behavior when you command it. You also want to be consistent with the way you say your markers as well as your commands. Remember, your dog doesn't see the word sit spelled out as S-I-T in their mind. They hear a sound. So you want your command always to sound the same, meaning you shouldn't constantly be changing the rise and inflection of your voice. On this topic, let's now discuss predictability. This word is not part of the primary principles, but it's one you always need to keep in mind when it comes to dog training. Always think about your actions as you train your dog, and if they are becoming predictable or not. You can use this to improve the training process, or by contrast, it can eventually create problems. For example, let's say you love taking your dog to the beach, and this is an activity that your dog enjoys. Every time you're ready to leave, you call your dog to you. Eventually, your dog will learn not to come to you when you call them at the beach, because it's now a predictable pattern that when you call your dog, that it's time to leave. So this would make it tough to get your dog to come to you because the dog doesn't want to leave the beach. Instead, you would always want to play come when called games at the beach that predicts a release and a reward, like a ball. This way your dog will enjoy coming to you when called. It's a simple concept. If your dog can predict something, then your dog can learn it, just like obedience. You say the command, and then you show your dog the physical cue. This way the dog learns that when you say a command, it is then followed by the action that gets the dog into the position. Once the dog knows this, you no longer need the physical cue because it is now predictable for your dog. My get out of jail free card. For all the dogs that I work with, I have what I call a get out of jail free card, which is a reward for successfully coming to me. Even if my dog did something that I disapprove of, if my dog comes to me, I will reward my dog for that action, the action of coming to me. You always want your dog to know that coming to you is a good thing, no matter what happened before that. This is for safety. If your dog doesn't know what to do in a situation that may be confusing, if they come to you as the default behavior, this could be life-saving. So it's very important to keep that in mind, and I always recommend to everybody to use that get out of jail free card with their dogs. Understanding operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a form of learning that teaches the subject desired behaviors through consequences and rewards. This is the psychological foundation that dog trainers use as the underlining framework for all techniques. Remember from the last chapter how there are 4 important quadrants to operant conditioning? And those 4 are positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. Using operant conditioning style training with your dog will teach him or her that their behavior has an effect on their environment, meaning the dog believes that it is their action that can make rewards or corrections happen to them. Before we move forward, I would like to explain how to remember the 4 quadrants that we learned earlier and go further into what they mean. The first thing to keep in mind is that the term positive means to add to the equation or to add to the situation. So positive reinforcement means we are adding a physical reward like a treat, a toy, or petting. On the contrast, negative means we are taking away. So negative punishment means you are removing the reward, such as not giving the dog a treat until the dog does the behavior correctly. Positive punishment means to add a physical correction. Negative reinforcement means to turn off pressure once the desired result or behavior is reached. So positive means adding to the equation, negative means removing from the equation, punishment means preventing a behavior from being repeated, and reinforcement means encouraging a behavior to be repeated. We will start with the easiest of the four to understand, and that's positive reinforcement. This is what most people use with their dogs. The owner will give the dog some form of a physical reward when the dog performs the desired behavior. So for example, when the dog sits, the owner will give the dog a treat for sitting, teaching the dog that sitting is a good thing. An easy way to look at it is that we use positive reinforcement for any behavior we would like the dog to repeat by giving them a reward for that action. The next one that most people use and understand is negative punishment. As I mentioned before, all negative punishment means in dog training is to withhold a reward. This should be delivered when the dog makes a mistake or isn't performing the correct behavior, and as a result, the human will not give the dog the treat until the dog shows the desired behavior. For example, you're teaching your dog a sit and the dog keeps trying to jump up to get the treat out of your hand. So you withhold the reward from the dog. The second the dog sits, you immediately pay the dog, and the dog then realizes that all he had to do for the treat was to sit. The next is positive punishment, which is a process of giving the dog a physical correction with a training collar to stop undesirable behavioral traits. If I have a dog, and that dog's favorite thing in the world is to chase cars, the only way I can stop that dog from performing that behavior is by correcting it out of the dog's repertoire. Remember, everything is based on motivation. Whatever the dog is most motivated to do, that's what the dog will do. So to not chase the car, the dog must be more motivated not to receive a correction than the dog is motivated to chase the vehicle. Last is negative reinforcement. We use this in dog training by implementing a technique called leash pressure work. Every dog has what's called classical opposition reflex, meaning when you pull one direction on the leash, the dog pulls the opposite. In this exercise, we teach the dog to go with the pressure on the leash by using negative reinforcement. So by not turning off the pressure until the dog complies, teaches the dog always to go with the pressure on the leash. And we can then use this to teach behaviors and develop reliability within our obedience. By understanding and utilizing operant conditioning with your dog, you can train your dog to become that well-behaved companion you've always wanted. Different types of training tools. Please note that I do not advocate the use of any training collar, whether it be remote training collar, pinch collar, choke chain, or any other questionable collars. However, it's important to understand how they work so that you can be fully prepared in the event that you feel you need to use one. Remote training collar. These are also known as shock collars. When these collars are used correctly, they are perfectly safe. However, ethical considerations arise when used by inexperienced, negligent, or careless trainers. Pinch collar. This style of collar adds a correction to the dog by creating pinching or pressure when the leash is popped, activating the collar, increasing motivation to perform obedience tasks. Martingale collar. This is similar to the pinch collar as far as the use and application. However, this collar only works well on dogs with low correction levels, meaning if the dog is very sensitive to a correction. This collar usually doesn't provide enough of a correction for dogs with higher correction levels who are less sensitive to corrections. Gentle leader or halty. This was originally designed for a horse, and the mindset was, if it works for a 1,500-pound horse, why wouldn't it work on a dog? The problem is horses are built differently than dogs, and it can be unsafe to use on your dog because over time, it has the potential to increase the cause of neck injuries. Choke chain. This collar has the potential to be dangerous and can cause lifelong injuries to your dog. Only the most skilled dog trainers can use this collar correctly without it being a risk to their dog's health. So unless you're an expert, I would advise to stay away from this collar. Flat nylon or leather collar. These collars are basic functional collars. They can hold your dog's dog tags and provide some pressure when used with the leash. Harness. These are excellent and highly recommended for when you want your dog to pull. I use a harness to build a dog's confidence. I also use it when I'm exercising them. There are multiple different types of harnesses that can be used on a dog. Some are designed to pull and others can be used for working dogs. Puppy binder. After buying your puppy, it's a very good idea to not only ensure your dog is properly vaccinated, but that you also have copies available of all important information and medical records. I feel the simplest solution is to keep a binder available with all the important documents, such as veterinarian records, the puppy's birth certificate, any contracts related to the purchase, or any other records that your puppy may have. 4 different types of training. 1. Reward-based training. This is the ideal training to start your dog on, but it can also take the longest. This is when you use rewards to shape all the desired behaviors, and you use negative punishment when your dog fails to perform the action. They learn to go into different positions to access rewards. This training is almost entirely stress-free for a dog, and it also makes the training very positive for them. This training uses a combination of positive reinforcement and negative punishment. Pressure-based training. This style of training is excellent if you want faster results. This training uses a combination of negative reinforcement, negative punishment, and positive reinforcement. You turn the pressure on. When your dog complies, you immediately turn the pressure off and reward your dog. I don't always prefer to start this way, but I like to use this a little later in the training for reliability and for teaching the dog how to turn off pressure. However, some people do prefer to start this way because by beginning with this style, your dog will learn more quickly to go into the desired positions in order to turn off that pressure. Escape avoidance training. This is when you correct your dog into the desired position. This is considered an older style of training and is not as commonly used anymore. The dog does learn very fast, but it can create a bad association to the training. The dog is learning to escape a correction by going into the desired position. This training uses a combination of positive punishment, positive reinforcement, and negative punishment. 4. Balanced training. This is the most preferred style of training. This is when you use a combination of all 3 methods. The balanced training also uses all 4 elements: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. In my professional experience, this style of training creates the happiest dog with the highest level of reliability. If you're going to correct your dog, when should you correct your dog? Next, we're going to go over different examples of when you would need to correct your dog. Other than breaking a stay, it's also imperative to understand that you should not be correcting your dog until your dog knows the commands, knows what's expected of him, knows how to turn off pressure by complying, and has been given a clear path to success. Here's an important analogy to understand how corrections work when training your dog. It's important to remember that every dog has what we like to call their own bank account. This would be the correction level. Some dogs are very wealthy and some are penniless, just like people. Let's say you are speeding down the highway and a police officer pulls you over and writes you a 25-cent speeding ticket. The second the officer leaves, you may start speeding again. The ticket wasn't high enough to get you to change your behavior. But let's say he pulls you over and writes you a $10 million speeding ticket. Now it's so high that you avoid driving altogether and you become very stressed out. But let's say he pulls you over and writes you a $125 speeding ticket. That would be enough to get you to slow down without getting you to avoid the behavior of driving. This is what we must do with our dogs. We need to correct them at a level that is adequate to their bank account. If you give your dog a command and they choose not to perform that command, the moment they decide they aren't going to execute the command, you would say one no, and then you would correct your dog with the training collar. After the correction, you will give the command to your dog once again. If your dog still doesn't perform the behavior, you would then use your leash pressure to help the dog go into that position. So it should go as followed. You ask the dog to do the behavior, they don't do it. You give them a correction, you recommand the behavior. If they don't do it, you simply help them perform the behavior using a physical cue that you use to teach your dog to perform that specific behavior. You can use corrections immediately to stop undesirable behaviors that are not related to obedience commands such as sit, down, come, and heel, and so forth. For example, if your dog digs, then you can correct that behavior out of your dog's repertoire. But you have to be sure to correct your dog when they are digging, not hours after the hole has been dug. Remember, it's important that we set our dogs up for success through staging different scenarios so we can reward them the second they do it right. We also set them up for failure so we can correct them the moment they do something wrong. Once you correct a dog for any bad behavior, you must immediately reward them when they are no longer doing that bad behavior. So if your dog was digging and you corrected your dog, the second your dog stops digging, you would praise and reward them for making the right choice. We must make sure we always give our dogs the right answer. Here's another example. Let's say your dog jumps on people, as many dogs do. You would say no the moment your dog jumped up, and you would then give them a correction. The second all four paws are back on the ground, you would immediately praise and reward your dog. This way your dog will learn that if he wants to be petted, then he must be sitting nicely. You can also use this technique with leash pressure instead of the correction. Here's a simple list of behaviors that can be removed using this concept. However, it is important to keep in mind that there are different techniques to stop and teach different behaviors. So you don't necessarily have to correct behaviors out of a dog's repertoire depending on how intense or how much the dog likes to perform these behaviors. The situation will change depending on each dog. Play biting, biting the leash, jumping on furniture, jumping on doors, barking at people outside, such as the mail carrier, barking at the doorbell, barking in the crate, barking for attention, relieving themselves inside the house, chewing furniture, eating feces, chasing, such as chasing the house cat, marking their territory, barking at dogs or people while on a walk, getting into the trash. So we went over when to correct your dog, but when not to correct our dogs. If your dog is afraid of something, do not use a physical correction to help them get over this fear, as this will only make the fear worse. For example, let's say your dog is afraid of fireworks and you have your dog in a downstay, and somebody starts shooting off fireworks. If your dog breaks the downstay to get away from the fireworks, you would not want to correct them back into the downstay. Instead, you would let the dog break the downstay without any consequences, because in the dog's mind, he's not breaking the down, but escaping the fireworks. You should not correct your dog for showing signs of food aggression or toy aggression. Correcting a dog for food or toy aggression can, on occasions, make the aggression much worse. If your dog is being aggressive in this instance, it's usually because your dog doesn't trust you and believes you will take the food away or the toy away and will not give it back. If you're running into this, then I would first suggest doing a value transfer. When using the value transfer technique, you have to make sure your dog is not being aggressive when you show him the other item. This is vital to keep in mind because if you offer the other reward when the dog is being aggressive, then you would be reinforcing the aggression, which you obviously don't want. A potentially more practical solution for food aggression is to feed your dog in their crate. The basic strategy is to never take food away from your dog after it has been given, and crate feeding solves this problem. This way, they will never have a fear of you stealing their food. Another option is to start feeding every meal from your hand and making your dog work for it. If the aggression issue seems to be getting worse, then I would suggest scheduling a private lesson with a local professional. Confidence building. Confidence in a dog is a lot like confidence in a human. Almost universally, it's a positive characteristic. As an example, would you want a confident employee or one who's unsure? A confident doctor or a frightened doctor? Do you want a social circle with friends who are confident and positive or who are constantly having anxiety? As a trainer, sometimes owners tell me of their issues with dogs that lack confidence. An example might be a dog who's shaky, scared to try new things, fearful of ordinary situation, or prefers to ignore her owner instead of doing something uncomfortable. The solution, they may say, is, I want my dog to become submissive to me, so it stops acting anxious and does what I tell it. However, contrary to popular belief, we do not want a submissive dog. In a dog's mind, submission means, look how small I am, please don't hurt me. So why would we ever want our dogs to feel that way? The dog may push itself to do certain behaviors if it's truly become submissive, but these behaviors end up being out of fear. At the end of the day, you have a fearful dog, not a confident one. By contrast, a confident dog is much easier to teach new behaviors to. A dog that is willing to try new things is much easier to train than a dog with fearful characteristics. This means far fewer problems with your dog down the road compared to having a submissive, fearful pup. There are a few things that can be done with a puppy or adult to increase their confidence immediately. Similar to the Disney character Bolt the Superdog, we can build a dog's confidence by making them believe they are a superdog. This can be done through confidence building activities. An easy way to look at confidence building is to take something that the dog may be unsure about and make it predictable as something pleasant instead. For example, let's say you want your dog to get comfortable with different noises and sound. So you fill an empty kiddie pool with empty plastic bottles for the puppy or dog to play in. At first, the puppy or dog may be hesitant about the situation. But if you show the puppy or dog that it's fun by either getting in the pool first or luring the puppy or the dog into the pool, they will soon discover that it's a fun activity, and the puppy or the dog will associate the sound of the plastic bottles with fun. This is something that a lot of protection dog trainers will do with their puppies because in many protection sports, they will use what's called a bottle curtain. It's basically a bunch of empty plastic bottles hanging from a pole in a curtain-like fashion that the dog will have to run through. Simply put, it's about constantly exposing your dogs to new things and making those activities pleasant by predicting something that the dog enjoys. If you understand this, I don't have to show you different confidence building scenarios. You can come up with scenarios on your own by being creative and understanding how the science works. Take something, make it predict something nice. Eventually, whatever predicts something nice will become something your dog is confident and comfortable with. The idea is to be on the same team as your dog, rather than having a relationship based on fear or the belief that the owner needs to be the alpha. Behavioral issues. You can almost always expect to run into some kind of behavioral problem with any dog of any age. And the key is knowing how to properly handle the situation when it arises. Below is a list of some of the most common behavioral problems that we run into in regard to both puppies and adult dogs, including aggression-related problems. While these behaviors can occur with any dog, the solutions are different depending on the dog's age, which we'll explore in more detail. A list of common behavioral issues: jumping up on people, pulling on the leash, barking at the front door, relieving themselves in the house, barking or whining in their crate, barking at dogs or people while on a walk, chewing furniture, destroying property, begging for food, getting on counters or furniture, digging, eating feces, chasing, biting at your hand when trying to take a toy, biting or growling when taking away food, biting at your hand when putting on a collar or leash, aggressively rushing at house guests who enter, acting aggressive inside the crate, growling, barking, or snapping if given a command, aggression towards other dogs. Among behavioral issues, the most concerning is often aggression. This can be a big concern among many pet owners because it calls into question whether your dog can normally interact with other people and other dogs. A family may also be upset because they no longer feel as safe. They may also believe that the aggressive behaviors are a sign of bad breeding or a dog with psychological issues. However, aggressive tendencies are often misunderstood, and many may not be related to your dog's breed nor because of psychological problems. Very often, owners have unknowingly conditioned their dog into certain behaviors, and it's especially important for owners and new puppies to be mindful of these principles. In the next chapter, we'll go over how to deal with behavioral problems, aggression in dogs of different ages, what can cause it, as well as many other issues with raising a new dog. Choosing and raising a dog. Puppies. Whether you're a first-time or experienced dog owner, getting a new puppy can be a lot to consider. Of course, owners who prepare will experience a lot less stress and a lot more fun. In this part, we'll go over some important pointers regarding bringing a new puppy into the home and how to raise them. Choosing the right breed. One of the most common questions people ask me is, hey, what breed should I get? And my first thought is typically, what's your lifestyle like? I want to know if you lead an active lifestyle. Do you want a companion to take hikes with? Or would you prefer the type of dog who enjoys lounging by the fireplace and all-day movie marathons? This is a major factor because dog breeds equal incredibly different personalities. The common belief that it's not the dog, it's how you raise them is a huge misconception. While nurture does have an effect, genetics can play an even larger role. Some of these bullet points may seem like common sense, but many people need reminding about these factors. It's not all about how cute your new puppy is. If you lead an active lifestyle, get a dog that can keep up with you. For example, you may want a Vizsla. That's just one example of many breeds that are excellent for an active lifestyle. By the contrast, if you lead a lifestyle that is less active, perhaps if you work at home or on the computer all day, a Vizsla may not be such a good idea. Instead, maybe a Boston Terrier would be a better idea. It would have just enough energy, but it wouldn't go into overdrive by never having an off switch. After determining the activity level, the next thing to consider is factors like the size of the dog, whether you're worried about shedding, if you can maintain a thick coat, or if you prefer a thin coat or a dog with hair instead of fur. Another factor is intelligence. Without directly insulting any of our canine friends, the unfortunate truth is that some dogs are smarter than others. Now, getting the most intelligent dog could seem like the best idea, but if you don't keep that advanced brain constantly working, such a dog could become destructive. On the other hand, a smart dog could also be a great joy to own. These are, again, factors that depend on the personal preference and lifestyle. Another common concern is the cost of a new dog. Veterinarian bills can be steep, and some dogs are prone to many health problems, by comparison to other breeds that tend to stay healthier. As you can see, it's important to take many variables into consideration. Equipment. To make life easier, it's best to be prepared and to have the right equipment when the puppy arrives. Here's a list of some of the basics that I like to have whenever I get a new puppy. First, the crate. Your puppy will need to be potty trained. Therefore, it's important to initially have a crate that is only a little larger than the puppy, with only enough space to stand up, turn around, and lay down. This will make the puppy learn to hold it or hold their bladder. After your puppy grows up and is already potty trained, a bigger crate is acceptable. Puppy pen. This is a good idea if you want your puppy to run around and play, but limiting access to the rest of the house. You can also use puppy gates for this. Puppy gates can usually fit in any doorway within the household. The leash. I recommend a 4 or 6 foot thin leash. Don't worry about getting the collar until you get your puppy, because you don't know yet the size of the dog you're going to get, and it will need to be fitted. Food and water bowl. I like to reinforce the importance of a proper diet. Many of the common brands of dog food we see at the supermarket are not a good idea for your dog and could cause serious health issues in the future. When choosing the right food for overall health, freeze-dried and raw can give the best results. It would be wise, though, to speak to a representative at a local, natural pet store. Dog bed. Help your puppy to learn to adjust to their own special place of comfort. A popular command we use is the climb command. That teaches the dog to go to their bed and stay until given the release word. This is very easy to teach when you know the proper steps. Lucky for you, this information is explained in detail and demonstrated with the dog in our training videos such as on my YouTube page. Toys. Having a few toys at the house when your dog comes home will help with the transition and give you and your new puppy a way to bond. Just be sure to never leave a puppy unattended with toys. This is for safety concerns, as many puppies will try to eat the toys, which can cause serious health issues such as a ruptured bowel, blockage, or possibly death. Preparing your home. Congratulations, you figured out what type of puppy you're going to get, which can be a tough choice. Now you may be worried that the little scoundrel is going to eat your master's feces on your desk. So puppy-proofing your house may be a good idea. Here are some of the suggestions that I have. Firstly, if you want to control where the dog goes within the household, then use puppy gates. These will restrict the dog from going into certain rooms or leaving certain rooms. They can be installed in most doorways. Start to develop puppy-proof habits. Much like being concerned with a rogue 2-year-old child, it's wise to pay attention to what is accessible for the puppy to chew on or to steal. Don't leave your remote control on the coffee table, for instance. Is your bedroom compatible for your puppy's crate? It's a good idea to keep your puppy close to you at night to prevent stress and anxiety, which could lead to a lot of whimpering during the puppy's early years. You should also be prepared to get up during the night to potty the puppy. Preparing yourself for the dog's training. The moment your dog enters your home, it is learning. We want to make sure it's learning the things that will maintain as it grows into an adult. Below is a list of some basic obedience commands that will help you have an easier, more pleasant life with your dog. You can begin to apply these right away using the information you've learned so far in this book. And in the next chapter, we'll go into more detail in the methodology. Basic commands are as follows: sit, sit, stay, come when called, down, down, stay, climb command or go to your bed stay, and loose leash walking. Raising a puppy. Let's first go over the basics of puppy raising, as many owners choose to bring home a new dog when they're still very young. The mindset of a puppy is different from that of an adult dog. We all know how energetic and playful such young pups can be. However, just like human children, their behavior is also complicated, which is why they need so much proper guidance. What we must remember when working with any dog of any age is the basics. Make them aware of the behavior that you don't like, show them what you would prefer them to do, and then rewarding them for the correct behavior. This means communicating with the pup in a way that's very clear, very easy to understand, resulting in an improved relationship with your puppy as he or she grows. Basic obedience for puppies. From the very beginning, we want to start shaping the puppy's behaviors to help the puppy realize that his behavior has an effect on his environment. Operant conditioning, as explained in the earlier chapters. Below is a list of some basic commands that will help you have an easier, more pleasant life with your puppy. You can teach these to dogs of any age. Even though these commands seem basic, the challenging part is achieving reliability. For instance, ensuring that your puppy will perform these commands in spite of distractions or new environments, or whether or not you're holding a treat in your hand. In actuality, such reliability is not difficult to teach once you're equipped with the right tools and knowledge. Puppy aggression. Among a puppy's behavioral issues, aggressive problems are often the most concerning for new owners. A new owner may even fear that the aggressive behaviors are a sign of bad breeding or a dog with psychological problems. However, it's not always the case. Often owners are teaching or reinforcing aggressive behaviors without even realizing it. It's imperative to be aware that a puppy may be using aggressive behaviors as a way to get the desired outcome by manipulating the owners. This is the important time to stop these behaviors before they carry into adulthood. An example of accidentally reinforcing an aggressive behavior could be your puppy is on the couch, you try to get the puppy off of the couch, the puppy growls, so you leave the puppy on the couch. What next happens is that the puppy grows up and this behavior has become hardwired into adulthood. While it may have felt innocent or possibly even cute when the dog was small and fluffy, the adult version of the puppy growling from the couch is now threatening and scary. What should be done in this situation is to act like you're not even acknowledging the growl, and then simply get the puppy off the couch. This way the puppy learns that growling doesn't work. Keep in mind that most puppies are either trying to get some result from their aggression or they have fear aggression. You will very rarely encounter a puppy or even an adult dog that is dominant aggressive. Fear issues in puppies. Often a puppy will go through a period of fearful behavior, sometimes known as the fear period. During this time, the dog may appear to be easily startled, worrisome, and seemingly losing confidence. There are some important considerations. Firstly, it's not good to reinforce the behavior by soothing or petting. Yet at the same time, it would not be good to correct the dog as a punishment. Instead, it's best to help the dog work through this period by slowly exposing them to the things that they are afraid of, showing them that they predict something pleasant until they are gradually regaining their confidence. Potty training. One of the first things people want to teach their puppy is how to be properly potty trained. Next, I'm going to go over a simple, step-by-step process involving a crate that is just big enough for the dog to stand up, spin around, and lay down, and not any larger. This will allow the dog to learn how to hold their bladder. How to crate train your dog. Crate training is vital to ensure your dog is housebroken. Nobody wants a pet that poops and pees constantly in the house. This is something that should be done immediately after buying a new puppy or an adult dog who is not housebroken already. The first guideline for crate training is that you always want to make the crate a pleasant place for your dog and never a place of punishment, like as a timeout or something of that sort. The second most important guideline is to never put your dog in the crate only when you're leaving the house, or the dog will learn that the crate means that you are leaving, and this can create anxiety and further problems for the crate training process. Here is a list of crate to-dos. Feed your dog in their crate with the door closed. Put your dog into the crate randomly throughout the day, even when you're not leaving the house. Give your dog treats in the crate. Have your dog sleep in the crate at night. Depending on the age of the dog, we have to consider how long they can hold their bladder. A young pup at a couple of months old should stay crated for a couple of hours. This time frame can become longer the older the dog is. After the time in the crate, the puppy is taken outside and given a chance to go potty. If they successfully go potty, the dog should be rewarded, perhaps taken on a walk. We try to reinforce that the bathroom breaks lead to more fun activities. If the puppy doesn't go, then he or she is brought back into the crate, we wait 20 minutes, and then we repeat the process. The important factor is to make the dog associate going outside with going potty, and that it could be something to look forward to. If the puppy happens to go inside the house, you don't need to rush at it with a punishment behavior. You simply say no, take the pup outside, and reward with positive reinforcement after the pup goes potty. In this situation, if the puppy doesn't go potty, just like before, the puppy goes back in the crate, and you repeat the process until the puppy goes outside. If the puppy has gone potty in the house, but you did not catch them in the act, then you do not correct them. You must catch them immediately in the act, or they will not understand. Often people will argue until they're blue in the face that they can teach a dog not to go potty in the house, even if they catch them after the fact. However, out of the 10 times they corrected the dog for this behavior, 1 or 2 of the times they actually caught the dog in the act. And that's when the dog learned. Here's an analogy I like to explain to people to get them to understand this concept. Let's say you become a prisoner of war in a foreign country where you don't speak the same language, and you have your little prison cell with a toilet that you use every day with no issues. One day you become bored and you start to carve on the wall. One of the guards sees you carving on the wall, and it runs into your cell yelling at you in a language you don't understand, and they take your face and they shove your face into the toilet. Are you going to think that they are shoving your face into the toilet because you used the toilet? Or are you going to think they're shoving your face into the toilet because you were carving on the wall? Because that's what you were doing when they started yelling at you. It is the same for our dogs and our puppies. If your dog or puppy goes to the bathroom inside the house and you do not see them go to the bathroom, and the dog starts a different activity, whatever that activity may be, if you start to yell at your dog during that activity and shove your dog's face into their own mess, they are going to think that you are shoving their face into their own mess because of the activity that they were doing when you started yelling at them. So it's very important to keep this in mind. Final note, if the puppy goes potty inside their potty training crate, then more likely than not, it's your fault. Dogs do not go potty where they sleep or where they eat, unless they simply cannot hold it. However, if you find your puppy going potty in the crate, even though you've given your puppy many opportunities to go outside, then there is a possibility that your dog has a UTI and you should take them to your local veterinarian. Socializing a puppy. Most people think that socializing means allowing your puppy to play with every other dog in the area. That's not necessarily true. The important concept is to expose your puppy to new environments, people, and situations. This allows the dog to become well-adjusted and balanced. But it's important to control the situation. As an example, we wouldn't want your new puppy to be exposed to an aggressive dog at the dog park, thus associating the park with that confrontation. The same can be said for humans with poor skills around animals. Therefore, socializing a puppy is a process that involves creating situations to help your dog learn in a positive way. An example could be exposing your dog to a friend who is a knowledgeable dog owner, who won't reward your dog for jumping on them, but will instead reward the dog for sitting, reinforcing the positive obedience training that you desire. Confidence building. Contrary to popular belief, as we mentioned in the last chapter, we do not want a submissive dog. In a dog's mind, submission means, look how small I am, please don't hurt me. Why would we ever want our dogs to think that way? Rather, our aim is to have a confident dog, Such a dog is much easier to teach new behaviors to. A dog that is willing to try new things is much easier to train than a dog with fearful characteristics. The idea is to be on the same team as your dog, rather than having a relationship based on fear or the belief that the dog needs to be the alpha. Adolescent dogs. So you have a puppy, and it seemed like training was going great from the beginning. Your puppy was following you everywhere, but now all of a sudden your puppy is starting to explore, becoming more independent, but is also ignoring your commands. This can be frustrating for dog owners as they discover their pup's developing personality. In addition, many of the mistakes that owners may make while the dog is a puppy can turn into serious problems as the dog gets older. As an example, the puppy jumping up on your lap may have been cute and it was rewarded for that behavior, but now your dog has grown larger and has muddy paws. Now jumping on you is potentially destructive. This can go for other behaviors such as pulling on the leash is now knocking you down. As a result, owners of adolescent dogs often seek help from professional trainers. Dealing with the common behavioral problems listed earlier may seem more intimidating as the dog grows in size during adolescence. It's important to make the dog stay aware of the behavior that you don't like, showing them what you'd prefer them to do, and then rewarding them for the correct behavior. This means communicating with the pup in a way that's very clear, very easy to understand, resulting in an improved relationship with your adolescent dog as he or she grows. Obedience training for adolescents. So you heard that it's best to start training when your dog's a puppy, but now you waited until your dog's an adolescent. Don't worry, this is still a good time to start obedience training. In fact, it's never too late to start training. The challenging part is often achieving reliability, even with commands that seem basic. As an example, ensuring that your dog will perform these commands regardless of the new environment or distractions, or whether or not there's a reward present. In actuality, such reliability is not difficult to teach once you're equipped with the right tools and knowledge. Adolescent aggression issues. It's important to take care of aggressive issues while the dog is still adolescent because these problems can become more problematic as the dog ages and becomes bigger and more intimidating. As with dogs of any age, owners are teaching or reinforcing aggressive behaviors without even realizing it. Adolescent dogs, as with puppies, may be using aggressive behaviors as a way to get out of the desired outcome by manipulating the owner. Once a dog is an adolescent, they start to become a little bit more intimidating compared to when they were a puppy, and so it may be easier to get manipulated. For example, when you go to collar your dog, the dog growls and you back away without finishing the job. Well, you just reinforced an aggressive behavior. This can be a tricky situation, given that an owner must be mindful of personal safety with a bigger dog. Fortunately, most of the time the dog is still faking the behavior. However, there is still a possibility that the dog will bite. So there's different ways to approach this. If you're running into this issue, get in touch with me or a professional trainer in your area. Adolescent fear issues. Often younger and adolescent dogs will still be going through a period of fearful behaviors, again, often known as the fear period. During this time, the dog may appear to be easily startled, worrisome, and seemingly losing confidence. If your adolescent dog is having fear problems or still having such issues carrying over from when they were a pup, there are some considerations to make. One thing is you don't want to reinforce the fearful behavior, such as petting them or soothing them when they're acting fearful. However, you don't want to correct the dog as if you're punishing it for being afraid, which in turn would make it more afraid. One of the best strategies is to help the dog work through the period by introducing slow exposure to things they're afraid of until the dog gradually regains confidence. Socializing and adolescent. When your dog is an adolescent, it is still an excellent time to start socializing, even if your dog hasn't been exposed to social activities before. Socializing doesn't mean allowing your dog to play with all the other dogs in the neighborhood or jump on every person that he or she sees. The big idea is to expose your dog to new situations, people, and environments without always necessarily having to go up to them and constantly saying hi. This leads to a dog that adjusts for many cases and has a balanced personality. But as always, it's important to control the situation. As an example, we wouldn't want your adolescent dog to be exposed to aggressive dogs at your nearby park, again, associating that park with the confrontation. Your dog should also avoid humans that have poor skills around animals. As before, you can try bringing your dog around other well-behaved dogs and owners who reinforce positive behaviors and activities that you think your dog might enjoy. Adult dogs. A lot of people start running into new issues with their dogs around 2 years of age. These issues arise because it's when the dog begins to enter a state of maturity, which means it now feels that it may be able to challenge existing rules. So what once seemed like a well-trained dog now feels larger and could be more difficult to control. This is not always the case though. You might just want to sharpen up your dog's obedience. Adult dogs' behavioral issues. Younger dogs can seem easier to control and easier to work with, but now your adult dog can seem overwhelming. Behaviors your dog may not have done before may start to arise, or previous issues have now progressively gotten worse over time. Another issue is that some of the obedience-related issues of a younger dog, such as taking your dog on a walk and he or she lunges at people who passes by, once may not have seemed like such a big issue because the dog was smaller, now runs the risk of actually scaring people while on your walk. A misconception is that an adult dog is too old to learn new behaviors or overcome obedience issues. Fortunately, that's not true. In fact, some adult dogs can seem to learn more quickly compared to some puppies. The concept for training an adult dog remains the same, which is ensuring the dog is aware of the behavior that you don't like, showing them the preferred behavior, and then providing rewards based on the obedient behaviors you desire. As always, it's about proper communication with your dog, which is a big part of my training philosophy. Basic obedience for adults. A dog doesn't have to be a puppy to remember valuable obedience training. This is good news if you have an adult dog, or if you neglected to do training when they were a puppy or adolescent. This is still a good time to start working on some of the basic obedience commands outlined in this book. A lot of times, dogs run into problems when they don't have a job to perform. This can be a good thing since dogs are unable to multitask. When you begin obedience training, they are now focusing on their new job and are unable to act out some of the more problematic behaviors from before. A lot of times, adult dogs run into problems when they don't have a job to perform. This can be a good thing since dogs are unable to multitask. When you begin obedience training, they are now focusing on their new job and they are unable to act out the problematic behaviors from before. It's important to achieve reliability even with basic commands. For instance, make sure that your dog understands the commands even in new potentially distracting situations or when a visible reward is taken away. Teaching reliability is part of the training process, and it's not as difficult as you may think, so long as you are equipped with the right knowledge and tools. Socializing adult dogs. At any age, it's important to begin socializing your dog. This is not just about allowing your dog to play with other dogs and meet all your friends, but getting them comfortable around new dogs, new people, and new surroundings. However, with adult dogs, some owners encounter difficulties with socializing based on their dog's unique personality. Some adult dogs just don't like other dogs very much, unlike puppies who seem excited with everybody. The same way that some people just don't like other people. This doesn't mean that if your dog doesn't like other dogs, social encounters should be avoided altogether, but you should provide exposure to other dogs without forcing the interaction. In any case, as always, you want to make sure the situation is controlled by you, the owner. You don't want your dog to have a bad experience with other dogs, humans, or particular situations, leading to negative associations and further problems in the future. Socializing is about introducing positive experiences for your dog, and with an adult dog, it becomes even more apparent what your dog likes and doesn't like. So consider what activities are best matched for your dog's personalities. Senior dogs. They say an old dog can't learn new tricks, but that's not true. Sometimes a dog in his or her senior years is really looking for a job or something to do, and obedience training for a healthy senior dog may be perfect. Behavioral issues with a senior dog. While many senior dogs can have lower energy, behavioral problems can still occur that were not fixed at any earlier stages in their lives. This includes all the common elements addressed for all other age groups. As with adult dogs, senior dogs can also present intimidating factors with certain unchecked behaviors. For instance, lunging at bypassers on the leash can be intimidating and scary for those subject to it in comparison to when these actions occurred when your dog was just a little puppy. There are some variables to keep in mind for senior dogs. Sometimes new behaviors happen in their older years that were not previously seen. This may be health related and caused by a change in the dog's body or mind. For instance, sudden urination in the house could be the result of a bladder disorder or unusual behaviors that can be the result of psychological issues. It's suggested to consult with a veterinarian if your senior dog is suddenly behaving odd. However, for long-standing behavioral issues, a trainer would be your best option. Even a senior dog can learn new behaviors and retain obedience training. A misconception is that a senior dog is too old to acquire new habits and overcome obedience issues. Fortunately, that's not true. In fact, some adult dogs and even senior dogs can learn more quickly in compared to some puppies. When training your senior dog, it's all about helping the dog become aware of the behaviors you were displeased with and guiding them to lead them to preferred practices, which can be done through rewards. The trick is proper communication with your dog. Basic obedience for senior dogs. Senior dogs are more willing than you think to start their obedience training. In fact, it can give a dog who is less active a renewed level of energy. As with adult dogs, senior dogs, in particular, sometimes desire a new job and a sense of duty, which by itself can fix many behavioral problems. This is because dogs are unable to multitask. Therefore, when you begin obedience training, they are now focusing on their new job and are unable to act out the problematic behaviors from before. Part of the process of mastering obedience training is achieving reliability even with basic commands. This means ensuring your dog understands the commands even in distracting situations or when the reward is taken away. I believe in reinforcing reliability as part of the training process. It can be easily achieved with the right knowledge and tools. Socializing senior dogs. It's important even for senior dogs to have socializing experiences. This includes both exposing your dog to other dogs and owners alike, but also getting them comfortable in different types of situations to ensure your dog's balanced behavior. Senior dogs are even more likely to have issues with other dogs based on their naturally ingrained personality and the clashes of such personalities. However, despite this fact, it's still important for the dog to be exposed to social encounters, so they maintain their doggy social skills. As with dogs of all other ages listed thus far, it's important to make sure the owner controls the situation. This means avoiding bad experiences that could make your dog react poorly to social situations. This can include exposure to misbehaving dogs or humans who are not good with animals. Most importantly, socialization is about creating positive experiences for your canine. Your senior dog will make it clear what he or she likes or doesn't, so try to judge the best experiences based on your dog's personality. Your training lesson. If you had scheduled a lesson with me, this section consists of an in-depth look at the meat and potatoes of that lesson. We'll cover the science behind teaching your dog any command. Your 8 steps to success with your dog. Step 1, teaching markers. Remember, this is also engagement training. You are paying or rewarding your dog for focusing their attention on you. So during this exercise, you're teaching your dog a few things. You're teaching them the communication channels, and you are teaching them that it's a good thing to look at you. The exercise goes as follows. You get the dog's attention. Once your dog is looking at you, you use your continuation marker, and then you deliver the reward. Once your dog eats the reward and looks back at you, you are going to use your terminal marker, move away, encouraging your dog to come to you to get the reward. You will continue to do this exercise until your dog is conditioned to both of these markers. Step 2, shaping desired behaviors. During this step, you will begin to teach your dog desired behaviors using either leash pressure or luring. This is called shaping. Before we can name a command, the dog must first understand, through a physical cue, what we want and expect from them. You will continue to carry out this step until your dog is performing each position in a way that you would like them to. Step 3, name the behaviors. Once we have our dog perform the action with our physical cue, it is then time to name the command. Remember, you must say the name of the command and then show your dog the physical signal. A common mistake that most people make is when they decide to name the command, they will say the command while they are giving the dog the physical cue. If you pair your physical with your verbal, the physical will override that verbal and become the only cue for the behavior. An example of this could be as simple as saying good boy, or the marker that trainers would prefer to use, yes, at the exact same time when they feed the dog the reward. By mixing the two actions together, the verbal cue no longer has relevance in the dog's mind. If we want the dog to learn the verbal command, then it is important to make sure that the verbal precedes the physical cue by a split second. Remember, everything must be predictable for our dogs in order for them to learn. So the process becomes command, motivate, mark, and reward in that order. So you say sit, then you lift your hand. Once the dog's butt hits the ground, you mark and then reward. You will continue to use the physical cues until the dog beats you to it. Meaning, if you say sit and before you lift your hand, the dog is already sitting. Now you know the dog knows the behavior on the verbal command alone. Step 4, teaching leash pressure. This is how you'll teach your dog to turn off pressure by complying. Put a leash and collar on your dog and start to pull the dog in one direction. When your dog puts on the brakes, continue to pull until the dog moves with the pressure on the leash. Once he moves with the pressure, you will immediately release the pressure and then reward your dog. You will place your dog in all the obedience positions using leash pressure only. You can also use food to help make the process much easier for you and your dog. Be sure to check out my YouTube video titled Speed Up Your Dog's Training with Leash Pressure, episode 16. For a sit, you will apply slow, steady pressure upwards until your dog sits. For a down, you will apply slow, steady pressure downward until your dog lays down, elbows touching the ground. For the heel, you will use leash pressure to guide your dog into the heel position. Anytime you use leash pressure, it is imperative to turn off the pressure once your dog makes the decision to go into the position. Step 5, teach the stay command using leash pressure. Once your dog knows all of the leash pressure cues, you can now start using it for your stays. Place your dog in a position of your choice. The moment your dog breaks the position, you will calmly say one no. Casually walk to your dog, grab the leash, and use the leash pressure to place your dog back into the position that was just broken. You must say no the moment your dog breaks the position, and you must only use one no for each offense, even if it takes you a few minutes to get your dog back to the position that they just broke. You will continue to do this step until your dog goes back to the position they just broke on their own after you say no. This will prove that your dog knows what is expected and that your dog knows how to turn off pressure by complying. As a side note, when teaching a stay, we do not say stay. The stay is implied when you put your dog into a commanded position. Step 6, teach reliability by adding correction. This move will ensure reliability in your commands. Now, when your dog breaks a stay command, you will say one no, but instead of using leash pressure, you will give your dog a correction with a training collar, even if your dog goes back to the position on their own. After you give the correction, you will then command your dog to go back to the behaviored position that was just broken. Step 7, safely using a remote collar. Again, I do not advocate the use of remote collar training. In the event, however, that you are required to use one, it's important to understand how they work so they can be used safely. First, it's important to make sure that your dog is directional to the remote training collar before you use it without the leash. So for the first 2 weeks minimum, you're going to pair the leash pops with the stimulation from the collar, meaning the moment the leash pops, you will press the button on the collar to give your dog the correction. This will help show the dog that you are giving the correction and that the collar is not just some random bug biting them on the neck. After 2 weeks of pairing the remote correction with the leash pop, you will test to see if your dog has become directional to the collar, which means your dog understands that it's a correction. You will place your dog on a climb command without a leash. You will wait till your dog breaks the command. The second your dog jumps off the command, you will say one no, followed by a correction with the remote training collar. Your dog will do one of 3 things: either freeze after it's been corrected, or go back to the climb, signifying that the dog is directional, or the dog will come running to you, showing that they are not directional. If your dog comes running to you, you will not continue to correct. You will place the leash back on your dog and you will continue to pair the collar with the leash for another week, at which point you will again attempt to see if your dog is directional. Once your dog is directional, you have then reached the status of off-leash trained. Things to keep in mind when using a remote collar. 1. Do not keep a remote collar on your dog for longer than 8 hours. 2. Do not leave a remote collar on your dog when you're not supervising them. 3. Always check your dog's neck when you remove the collar to ensure that your dog hasn't had an allergic reaction to the collar. 4. Make sure the collar is on and charged before placing it on your dog. 5. Unless you have advanced training on the remote collar, do not use the continuation button. 6. Be mindful of the collar setting. Do not accidentally shock your dog at a very high level. When you should or should not correct your dog with the remote collar. There are times when you can correct your dog with the remote collar even when your dog isn't directional yet, and that's for behaviors unrelated to obedience. You can use it to stop unwanted behavioral issues such as digging, getting into the trash, or any other unruly behavior mentioned previously. The second your dog starts to dig or put its nose into the garbage, you can activate the collar. This creates an unpleasant association to the problematic behavior. However, the important thing to remember is never to correct your dog with the remote collar if your dog is meeting a new dog or people. You do not want your dog to think that it is the other person or the other dog that is causing the correction from the collar. If you do, there is a possibility that the dog will develop aggression, so be mindful of that. In addition, as explained before, the remote collar is only used for creating reliability with all of the obedience commands, so long as the dog is directional to the collar. Lastly, this should go without saying, but never use the remote collar on your dog in an attempt to stop fearful behaviors. As mentioned before, this would only make the fear worse. Teach your dog to be proactive. At this point, your dog has likely become reactive in the presence of rewards. Remember, a reactive dog, these are dogs whose behaviors are actually being driven by the reward. And a proactive dog is a dog that understands that their behavior can create or make the production of a reward. Dogs are either reactive or proactive, and our goal is the later. There is a simple, proven process you can use to make your dog proactive. The first step involves teaching your dog the markers, the condition reinforcers, at which point you can start training your dog to be proactive. What you will want to do for the next few weeks is always have a reward handy, such as a treat or a toy, but your dog must not know that you have the reward. When you let your dog out of their room or crate, you will wait till your dog looks at you. The moment your dog looks at you, you will mark that behavior and then pull out a reward. In other words, your dog didn't see the reward, but your dog looking at you is what made the reward come out. You can also use free shaping to help teach your dog to be proactive. Anytime your dog does something that you like, such as sitting or going to their bed, you would mark that behavior and then reward them. If you do this enough, eventually your dog will start to act out behaviors they believe can get them a reward. This is going to teach your dog that they can make things happen for themselves. This is part of that operant conditioning, and this becomes a much easier dog to train. Now you have a dog that is actively working to materialize the rewards that they want. What types of food and treats to feed your dog? During the training process, I recommend using a high quality dry food. This way your dog's dog food can be their training treat. This is a healthier and cheaper option than using the store-bought sugar-filled dog treats. You can also use freeze-dried dog treats or even cheese or sliced hot dogs. A reward that your dog enjoys is going to make the training much easier. Now, freeze-dried dog treats is an ideal choice, but it can be quite expensive. That's why we will often use the dog's kibble for the training process. However, if you're looking for the best choice possible for your dog's diet, then I would recommend a 5-star premium raw dog food. Your dog needs a lot of water to stay fit and healthy, and many dogs on dry food are slightly dehydrated since dry food is only around 18% moisture in comparison to raw at 70% moisture. To learn more about dog food, I would recommend checking out dogfoodadvisor.com, or you can order a book on how to prepare homemade pet food called Dr. Becker's Real Food for Healthy Dogs and Cats. Simple, homemade food. Lastly, I would recommend checking out the documentary Pet Fooled. That's Fooled, Pet Fooled. Recommended treats for your dog. I don't recommend many store-bought treats, which are rarely healthy for your dog. Just read the ingredients to see what I mean. Lots of animal byproducts and factory floor scrapings. Instead, you're better off making your own treats or using premium ingredients. For example, freeze-dried treats, bully sticks, bones from a butcher, always raw and never cooked, a bone or Kong filled with a raw dog food or premium canned dog food and then frozen for a tasty frozen treat. Let's say your dog enjoys running away from you. This is a common problem that a lot of people will end up having, and it's not difficult to fix. First, you want to teach the behavior using the science behind training a dog to perform any command. Once your dog knows come when called, you can start working on building the habit of always coming to you by practicing the training every day. But let's say your dog is in your backyard or at the park and doesn't have a training collar on and no way for you to get your dog to come to you by force. Your dog knows there's no collar on him and he decides to run away from you instead of coming to you. Many people will instinctively chase their dog, but this only makes it worse as your dog is likely to think that you are playing a game. Instead of chasing your dog, you should playfully run away from your dog. This will usually turn the game around, and it will have your dog chasing you instead. Once your dog gets to you, do not end the game by quickly grabbing them, but instead continue the game by pushing them away from you in a playful manner. When you do decide to end the game, make sure you reward your dog, as this will encourage your dog to come to you because it predicts play instead of avoiding you to prevent a correction. How to stop a dog fight. Unfortunately, if you own a dog, there is a possibility that your dog may end up in a dog fight. The important thing is knowing what to do if the situation arises. What most people do in a panic is they try to pull the dogs apart by the scruff around the dog's neck, or even they try to hit them, hoping that will get them to stop fighting. Grabbing them by the neck is not only dangerous for the humans, but if you try to pull them apart that way, you can often end up causing more damage to both of the dogs. If you try hitting the dogs, hoping that will stop the fight, it may just add fuel to the fire and increase the struggle, since they'll be thinking that it could be the other dog causing the additional pain. The best course of action is to try and stay calm and target the dog that is being the aggressor. You will then grab the scruff on the dog's lower back by the base of the tail. You will then lift the dog up by that scruff until the dog lets go of the other dog. If the dog doesn't let go of the other dog, then you would twist the dog's scruff to make the dog let go. Be cautious though, because it is possible that some dogs may redirect the aggression on the human that is grabbing the scruff. Even though this isn't a perfect solution, and anytime a dog gets into a fight, there is the possibility of a dog being injured or the person being bitten. However, if you do it the way I just described, you will have a much higher chance of stopping the fight and coming out of it without an injury to the dog or yourself. Last option is to grab the dog's hind legs, lift up, and pull away. I don't always like using this option. I prefer grabbing the scruff because I'm worried about hurting the dog's legs by grabbing them and lifting them up. This is a common technique used by many shelters. I have used the technique of grabbing the scruff when dog fights have broken out around me, and it has worked for me every single time. But when I do it, the dogs often do turn around to see what is grabbing them, and I have had dogs mouth my arm without biting. But again, as mentioned before, there is always the possibility of being bitten if you are trying to separate a dog fight. In conclusion, dog training is an art form, and it takes years to become an expert. However, through the essentials we've provided in this manual, anybody can take their dog ownership to the next level right away. Although you won't master this field overnight, you can quickly develop at least the essential skills needed to fix the majority of issues that dog owners face. In addition, you'll discover a greater relationship with your dog as you now have the tools to address the bad behaviors that may have frustrated you or pushed you further away from your companion. I believe that improving the lives of dogs along with their owners is the most important thing. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.